The next step in this project is to build the galley, which we're really excited about. Before we begin building counters and cabinets and all that stuff, we're going to build the freezer, which goes in this corner. The reason that I'm building the freezer first is because it is kind of being built into the galley where it's going to be permanent. So I can't move it or anything, so I'm going to build the galley around the freezer. The goal this week will be to try and get this freezer done by the end of the week, have it built and painted. And hopefully those of you that are considering building your own refrigeration in your own boat will find this useful. We're going to go through every step that it takes to get it to the point where it's ready to install. My name is Matt. Follow along as I turn Duracell, the legendary ocean racing sailboat, into a comfortable cruising home. I'm building a custom freezer box this week from the inside out. The freezer will fit in this blind corner of the galley where it will be accessed from the top down by opening the counter. Once I knew the dimensions, I drew out the box on Onshape. I started with the inside box by just cutting out the sides on the table saw. After the sides were cut out, I glued the box together with super glue. And I use super glue because it's an instantaneous cure where I don't have to use fasteners, and I can quickly move on to the next step. I have these little 90-degree corner clamps that hold the panels in place while I glue them together. And I use glue on one edge and then spray accelerator on the other before clamping them together. This way the box goes together very quickly and very accurately.
So why can't we just buy a freezer?
Well, where the freezer is going in the blind corner is a very specific shape and dimension, and I can't just buy any freezer that meets those dimensions. And so it has to be a custom size in order for it to fit in that place. Plus, this freezer is also going to be double insulated, which I don't think you can buy a freezer this well insulated off the shelf. And this is cheaper that I'm using our own materials and building it ourselves. Once the box is together, I used some fairing compound to put big fillets in the inside corners of the box. This is to seal the corners and add some strength before I work on the outside of the box. And once those fillets were done, I moved to the outside of the box where I fiberglassed over all the joints with a light layer of cloth. The next morning, when the fairing was cured, I spent an hour or two getting the fillets really nicely sanded. I will do more fairing on this later, but for now, having the strength of the fillets and the corners faired is a nice start to the inside of this box.
Where are we going?
To the lumber yard, get some foam for the, insulation foam for the refrigerator, or freezer, rather.
What's the inspector doing with us?
I have to ask her. I have no idea what she's doing here. Oh,
There we are.
thanks, man.
Yep, you have a good one.
You too.
She asked the lumberyard people if she could do an inspection of their lumberyard. They said no. They were like, show us your certificate. She didn't have one.
used my CAD drawing to determine the dimensions for the insulation that will be glued to the outside of the fiberglass box and cut them out. This stuff is so easy to cut, I could have used my box cutter knife, but the table saw is much more accurate. I got all the insulation parts cut out, and here I test fit them together. So far, this is a really fun project. It's kind of a departure from the normal building inside the boat. This I get to build in the shop, and I'm using a little bit different materials, different kind of foam. But anyway, yeah. So the box is done, and I got the corners faired, and the next thing to do is to glue on this foam. This foam is it's called extruded polystyrene, XPS foam. It's the normal stuff that you buy at Home Depot or whatever. It comes in pink or black or gray, and this is 2-inch stuff, so it's got an R value of R10, I believe. And so, but I'm going to double it up, so there'll be 4 inches of foam all the way around the freezer. And we want this to be like a deep freezer that gets down to like 0 degrees. So there'll be 2 cold plates in it, its own compressor, and it'll be top loading so that cold air doesn't fall out of it when you open it. And hopefully very dry too. I'm going to do a nice lid with a seal and everything, but we'll get to all that later. For now, all I'm doing is gluing on the foam. And how I'm doing it is I can't really clamp it. I can't screw it. I don't want to put holes in the freezer box. And so what I'm going to do is actually use 2 glues. I'm going to use my normal Thixo as the kind of permanent glue, and that'll be on the inside of inside the perimeter of the foam, around the middle, and then around the outside, around the perimeter, I'm going to use super glue, just my regular thick super glue with the accelerator. This stuff does not hold up to solvents; it melts with solvents. But I've tested it out a bunch of times. Hold on. Oh, right here. I tested it out a bunch of times with the super glue and the accelerator, and it does slightly melt it, but I think that the solvent in the accelerator evaporates so fast that it doesn't matter. And so I glued these 2 pieces together, and it's solid. The reason that I'm doing this foam cord box on the inside is for impact resistance. If I were to, you could just laminate fiberglass straight to this stuff. But if you were to drop a a heavy, whatever, block of ice inside the freezer, it would put a giant dent in it. And so this stuff holds up a lot better to impact resistance and provides a little bit more insulation, makes the box a little bit smaller on the inside, but the interior volume will still be something like almost 3 cubic feet, so not too bad.
Cool. One more.
So that's just the first round. I actually ran out of glue. I'm gonna put one more layer of foam around the outside. You'll notice I'm not doing a ton of gluing I'm making sure that it's going to stay together, but this thing will get kind of built in place. There will be walls around it, so there won't be an opportunity for it to fall apart or anything like that. But I think there's plenty of glue holding it together already. So yeah, the next step is putting the outside walls on, and then we'll build kind of the what leads up to the counter in the coming days. I've got all of the insulation glued to the outside of the freezer box. So the inside is fiberglass, foam core fiberglass, and that's for impact resistance. And so I'm going to build that up on the top here as well, and then fiberglass over it so that when we drop stuff into the freezer, it's very well protected. And it's also, when the lid comes down, we can make a nice seal. So it's basically finishing the top of the freezer. You may recognize some of this from, I got a lot of these ideas from watching Matt's channel, Sail Life. He did a great video about making his fridge on his boat. And so I got a lot of ideas from him, so thanks, Matt. And once these are all glued on and fiberglassed in, then we can actually just put it in the boat. So we're making lots of progress with this. Last piece. The top of the box is built in this shape so I can easily build an insulated lid that seals nicely against the box to avoid any moist air from entering the freezer to prevent frost buildup. Fiberglassing over the top of the box is the last step before the finish work begins. I'm just applying 2 layers of 6-ounce cloth tapes to give the area lots of impact resistance. The goal this week is to get the inside of the freezer box painted by the time we publish this video. So after the composite work was done, it was time to start the finish work process. I did a quick once over with the sander to knock down the weird spots and scratch anything that the peel ply missed. Before I can apply the All Fair, I need to prime the surface with HoldGuard Extra, which is the epoxy primer that will tie the raw fiberglass surface to the fairing compound. We want a really good chemical bond so no coatings fall off. So I got my gun set up, and after a good cleaning, I got to spraying. I baked the freezer overnight to let the HoldGuard primer set up, and the next morning it was ready for the fairing compound. All Fair is really easy to use. It's just a 1-to-1 mixing ratio that is very satisfying to mix together and goes onto the surface like cake frosting. I've watched professionals who make applying fairing look like an art. When someone does a good job applying fairing compound, it requires fewer coats and less sanding between coats. I'll get a lot of practice in the future, but for now I'm very much a novice. I applied the All Fair in the morning and put the freezer in a warm room to cure, and it was ready to sand by that evening. The All Fair is really easy to apply, but it's even easier to sand off. Having the right quiver of sanders makes the job quick and relatively painless. I was pretty happy with how it was looking at this point, so I decided to paint. If you remember, I painted the inside of my freshwater ballast tanks with another epoxy from International called 975P. It goes on thick and leaves a very nice smooth and hard surface, perfect for the inside of a freezer that will need to be cleaned every now and then. I had just enough left after the water tank projects to get a nice thick coat applied. So we're pretty happy with how this has turned out. As you can see with all this insulation, there's 4 inches of insulation all the way around it. It takes up a lot of space. It's like 2.6 or 2.7 cubic feet. So plenty of space for a small freezer, but they do take up a lot of space. But this is the perfect spot for it being a blind corner in the galley. There will be 2 cold plates inside it, and the more insulation that we have on it, the less electricity it will use. So I think it's going to be a really nice solution for keeping stuff super frozen on board. We have a few new Patreons to thank this week. First, thank you to Theo, who owns a pizzeria in Greece. And he's not a sailor, doesn't own a boat, but he loves having his own projects to do and does get out on the water here and there. And also thank you to Van, who is our first Wizard Patreon. He is a mountain guy, not a water guy, but he does believe in charting your own path. And he said he has plenty of projects to do. So thank you very much to Van. And lastly, thank you to Jimmy, who's a retiree in Australia and looking to start his own big boat project with his doggo. So good luck to you, Jimmy. And thank you again very much to everybody for helping support our project. We couldn't do it without you.